Well, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome. It's good to have you here. Everybody's assembling and grabbing their lunches today. So I'll just say a few comments before I turn things over. We're really pleased to do this again this year. We did this last year and had a great show of support and interest. We're doing it again. I think what we'd like to do is to connect the research committee to our experts in federal funding and policy. I think this is really helpful as you think about strategies, right? So you look at the federal government is doing in this area of policy and research development. We want to match that with our own local efforts in this area as well. So we've got two great speakers here today. We've got Brett Rudy, Vice President for the CU System, the Federal Relations and Health Policy. We're delighted to have you here today. We've also got Laura Buccini. Laura is the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Research and Development and Strategy. So we hope this is a very engaging session. I think it's a very important topic. And with that, I'll turn things over to Brett.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Flagg. We really appreciate having us here. So as I said, I'm Brett Rudy. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Federal Relations and Health Policy for the CU System. I am Anschütz's federal lobbyist designate. I know I see some friendly faces in the room, so it's great to see you. And for everyone that I have not met, it's really nice to be able to meet you. I will say part of my role in our team of federal relations, I have my wonderful colleague, Annie Larson, here today, who also works on our team. We are split between DC and here in Denver. So I am actually a DC-based lobbyist. So it's always really nice to come out to Colorado. And I'm super glad that it decided to warm up a bit just when I came in yesterday and I missed all the -degree weather. So that's also really nice. So just a little bit of a background of the CU Office of Government Relations. Part of what we do is to try to bring CU to DC and DC to CU. So we try and increase visibility or reputation and influence of CU at our nation's capital. This includes all 4 of our campuses, as well as the system in general. We work super closely together to make sure that everyone is on board with each other. We engage national policymakers on behalf of the university on science, health, innovation, immigration, funding policies. Pick your policy issue, we are engaged in it if it impacts the system. We also think about talking about federally funded research so our scientists can compete and make sure that we are competing at a high national level. That's going to be the core of what we talk about today. So we don't need to go into that. We also talk about student aid programs, workforce development programs, things along those lines. We are here anytime any faculty comes to DC. We are here to take you to agencies as well and meet with our federal lawmakers. We also bring our federal lawmakers and other federal agents here to campus. So if you want to invite someone to campus, we are the ones who organize that. So we are really a tool to utilize to help our campus, to help us move forward in a way that we need to. So now we're going to kind of go into where things stand in federal funding research in the 118th Congress. To kind of understand where things stand, because we are in a really weird place right now, we need to kind of talk about what has happened in Congress. So we are in the 118th Congress. This is the second most unproductive Congress of all time. They passed a total of 24 laws in the first session of the 118th Congress. As you can kind of see from this chart here, the kind of striped green is what happens in the first session. The solid green is what happens in the second session, which is the second year. There's always a lot more done in the second year because it always happens after elections, and they tend to pass more robust policies right after elections because everyone wants to get things done before they retire. But because not a lot has gotten done, it's going to really explain why we are where we are today in research funding. And why is this happening? So there's 3 real reasons for that. 1 is split government with slim majorities. 2 is leadership transitions. And 3 is the pending elections. And I'm going to go over this super, super quickly. We have some of the slimmest majorities of all time in the House of Representatives and the Senate. So the Senate has 51 Democrats, 49 Republicans, only leaving a 2-vote cushion for the Democratic majority. And the House of Representatives, currently there are 22 Republicans, 213 Democrats, and 2 vacant seats. That is a 4-vote majority. That means that everything really needs to get passed with intense bipartisanship. And that's really hard to do. So you can't really have a majority, and each party right now has wings of their parties, from the moderates to the rank and files. to the far left and the far right that are basically able to grip both of these majorities together to really prevent legislation from happening through. So that's really one of the main reasons, because there's really little wiggle room that can happen for either Speaker Johnson or Leader Schumer. We also have leadership transitions. We started a year ago with Kevin McCarthy as the Speaker of the House, with Hakeem Jeffries as the new minority leader of the House of Representatives, and then Senator Schumer maintaining majority leader and Senator McConnell remaining minority leader in the Senate. Fast forward 1 year, we have a new Speaker of the House, Speaker Johnson. He was elected Speaker in October after former Speaker McCarthy was ousted under some really complicated House of Representative rules that we do not need to get into. So we do have a new Speaker. He's only been in Congress for 6 years. So he doesn't have a lot of political baggage. He also doesn't have a lot of experience. So he's really heavily relying on the experience of current leaders. And it's actually led to a much more civil production since he has taken over. So actually things have calmed down a little bit in DC since he's been in there, because he's establishing new relationships with Leader Schumer, Leader McConnell, Leader Jeffries, and things have been moving in a more positive direction. We also got to shout out our 10 members of Congress from Colorado. We have our 10 members, our 2 senators, Senator Bennett, Senator Hickenlooper, our 8 representatives, including our 2 new representatives, who I guess aren't that new anymore, Rep. Pedersen, who represents the 7th Congressional District, and Dr. Caraveo, who represents the 8th Congressional District. I always like to shout out Congresswoman Caraveo, because she's a School of Medicine grad. She's our first Anschutz grad we've ever had in Congress. As a team, and as a system, we work incredibly well with all 10 members of our delegation. They all play crucial roles in supporting CU. They all love CU, and they all really help us. So part of our role as a CU system is to make sure that we are working with these 10 members to advance the policies and recommendations of our system, and they are really playing a crucial role, and we are really grateful to have 10 members that we can rely on. I can't say that for every state and some of our counterparts, but we are actually really lucky on that one. So the other thing that's really handicapping everything that's happening is the 2024 elections. I found out a week ago that there's a presidential election happening. Did not know about that, but apparently there's a presidential election. The House of Representatives and Senate also have elections, so you have a third of the senators. Neither of our Colorado senators are up this time, as well as every member of the House of Representatives. There are a lot of retirements happening in the House of Representatives, including 2 members from Colorado. We have Congressman Kent Buck from the 4th Congressional District, which is mostly the Eastern Plains and like Castle Rock. And then Congressman Lamborn, who is El Paso County in Colorado Springs. Both announced their retirements. They've both been in for, I'm trying to think, Buck's been in for like 10 years. Lamborn's at like 16 years. So those will be 2 new seats. Just in total, as of right now, and this was as of last week, there are a total of 8 senators and 43 representatives retiring. This is going to lead to some new leadership and some new transitions, and actually could have a big impact in Colorado, as due to the retirement of Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, we might see actually Congresswoman DeGette lead the Health Research Authorization Subcommittee next Congress. So it's something that we're actively following and actively trying to engage Congresswoman DeGette, as she would be in charge of the subcommittee that has jurisdiction over every health agency with the exception of Medicare. So that's going to be really great for Colorado to have one of our members have that sort of power. So now, to kind of do the backdrop on why they have accomplished nothing, just kind of be like, where are we now in funding? So in June 2023, the President and then Speaker McCarthy agreed to the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which established the funding caps for fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025. That included a 0.5% decrease in funding for non-defense discretionary programs and a 3.4% increase for defense programs. Then it was a 1% increase over 24 for 25, which was to curb spending and to set a top line number. This was also in the backdrop of the debt ceiling crisis. And so they also lifted the debt ceiling until January 1st, 2024. Well, and you could also see it was June 2023. This was only the 5th bill they passed by June 2023. That's what 118.5 means. So it's the 5th bill that passed in this Congress. Well, when Speaker Johnson took over, he was like, hey, I didn't agree to this deal. So he renegotiated the deal. And look, the numbers are exactly the same. And they agreed to new top line funding on January 7th. However, there are some major differences to what was established in the Fiscal Responsibility Act and what the fiscal year 2024 caps were. If you see that little star in the bottom, it says it does not include emergency funding for the 21st Century Cures Act, VA health funding, disaster funding, Ukraine support. The Senate, the Fiscal Responsibility Act allowed to what they call some funding gimmicks that you can give one-time emergency funding. This includes for CHIPS and Science Act, as well as some of the 21st Century Cures programs, to kind of up the funding above the caps. And it's just a one-time deal. Part of the deal that Senator Schumer struck with Speaker Johnson is you cannot do those funding gimmicks. So while the numbers look exactly the same, the fiscal year 2024 cap is much harder than the Fiscal Responsibility Act caps. So there's going to be less wiggle room, and there will be a 0.5% reduction across all non-defense discretionary programs. So what's currently happening with funding? Well, they're just punting and punting and punting. And I really struggled how to do the slide. And this is the only thing that I thought of happening. And I thought it's just a perfect example because they've just been negotiating the caps, and we had government funding expire on September 30th. Then we lost a speaker. Then there was a new speaker who was like, I can't do this, so I'm going to put it together. Then they got the caps settled, and then they wanted to push it farther. So as you see, we had the September 30th, went to November 17th, November 17th, went to January 19th and February 2nd. And then with one day to spare, last Thursday, they passed a CR that extends federal government funding to March 2nd and March 9th. They did it on Thursday because it was snowing an inch on Friday in DC, and that is enough to get everyone out of there because DC can't handle their snow. And I kid you that they really jammed it through last minute to avoid the snow. Something that's weird is you see two dates on here and not one date. This is a priority of Speaker Johnson. He doesn't believe in $2 trillion omnibus funding bills. So it's really important for him to kind of break out agencies from each other. And so we have 12 appropriations funding bills. So he agreed to a deal with Leader Schumer to have two different expiration dates on these different appropriations bills. So on March 2nd, it's going to include the Agriculture FDA bill, the Military Construction and Veterans Affairs bill, the Transportation, Housing and Urban Development bill, and the Energy and Water bill. Those all expire on March 2nd. There's also some health extenders, including the National Service Corps, Teaching Health Centers, GME, Community Health Centers, Medicaid dish cuts. They also all expire on March 2nd. On March 9th, it's the other 8 funding bills. So think about any other federal agency is under the next one, and that includes agencies that we really follow, including the Departments of Health and Human Services, Defense, National Science Foundation, Education, Commerce, Justice, pick an agency, Department of State. All of them are in that second bill. Part of the reason why they had the January 18th extension was because when they agreed to the final caps, there was not enough time to write the bill. So they really needed more time to write the bill. I am cautiously optimistic that they will finish the bills on March 2nd and 9th. I say cautiously optimistic because God knows what can happen down in Colorado or down in DC. But I will also say if they don't finish the bills by April 1, a 1% cut of sequestration across the board kicks in. So there is incentives to do that because it's less of a cut for defense and non-defense programs if sequestration doesn't kick in. So just kind of a little bit of history, especially when we talk about NIH funding. This is one of my favorite charts that one of my wonderful former colleagues, Tanaz Razuli, does every year. And it really shows the increase in NIH funding over the year, but how it really relates to inflation. And while since we've had about a 58% increase in NIH funding since 2015, if you look at that compared to NIH for high inflation rates, it's pretty flat from where it was in 2003. And under these fiscal environments, it's probably not going to get much better as we will look at numbers from that end. So that's why we still constantly push to advocate for NIH funding. And it's one of our top asks every year, no matter what, is to robustly fund NIH, because while we are improving in our total number, the impact is exactly the same. So we need to make sure that our members of Congress and our federal lawmakers are really engaged with increasing NIH funding. So where does NIH funding stand right now? We have the fiscal year, this is for every institute, you have the fiscal year 2023 bills, what the Senate proposed and what the House proposed. I will tell everyone, ignore the House numbers. There are drastic cuts in the House bill because when the House considered their bill, it was to a 5% cut to non-defense discretionary programs. We know for a fact that will not happen. The reason the National Cancer Institute had a cut is because it was an agency that has enough money to take from to do that. Congressman Bob Aderholt from Alabama, who's the chair of the House Labor, Health and Human Services, Education and Related Agencies Appropriation Subcommittee, even said that these cuts to NIH will not come to fruition. So I know everyone's probably seen them with different institutes that people might have been panicked that there have been cuts. These steep cuts will not happen. The Senate bill did mark up to the Fiscal Responsibility Act caps, and you see every one of those agencies are either flat funded or have a little bit of an increased funding to them. We believe that these are going to be much closer to what the final number is going to be. They did use some of those funding gimmicks specifically for some of the 21st Century Cures fund that expires. So you think about that happened in NCI and NIA and NIDA and NIMHD and the NIMH has a lot of those fundings attached to it from 21st Century Cures. We do not know what's going to happen about it. But what we see in the Senate is going to be much, much, much closer to what the final number is going to be. We look at the same thing for other health agencies, what's proposed. So if they have to do a 0.5% cut across the board and they're flat funding or giving increases to NIH, you look at the Senate bill and it's going to be something similar that they have to find some cuts for some agencies. So you kind of see some of the cuts for HRSA and CDC in the Senate bill. Once again, similarly, ignore the House bill. The House did propose to eliminate ARC. That will not happen. I think the Senate boldly came back and said, we will not eliminate that. The Senate also passed their Labor, Health and Human Services, Education and Related Agency bill by a bipartisan vote of 26-2 on their committee, which there's very few things that get that widespread bipartisan support when the House bill was deemed too controversial to even get a vote. So that will not happen. The ARPA-H number is an interesting one to watch out for because ARPA-H has gotten $2.5 billion in funding to the state as seed funding, and they don't really know what it needs per year. How much should that agency actually have? It's only an official agency for 1 year, and this will be their third appropriation cycle. So we are interested in seeing where that ends to. But we're also still advocating to make sure that HRSA, CDC, SAMHSA, ARC, FDA funding is going to be continuously robust because we know how important these programs are also to our campus and to our university system and making sure that they are robustly funded. Same with the VA Medical and Prosthetic Research Program, which always has bipartisan support. The NSF also had large increases. There was some emergency funding also attached to that through the CHIPS and Science Act. So we're curious to see where the NSF number lands at that point too. We did ignore the Defense Health Agency, and there's a reason why. And that's because even though we have, it's one of our fastest growing portfolios, as Dr. Flake and Laura spoke about so nicely in our State of Research presentation a few weeks ago, the way the Defense Health Agency gets funded is half the numbers come from the House, half the numbers come from the Senate. So we really can't even give you a based idea of what is existing for these programs because there's no comparison because the bills are so far off. So we will make sure to monitor what that number looks like when they actually come together and conference a bill, but that is why it's not on here. We also have a lot of work that we're doing to work on the Defense Health Agency. We have Dr. Babardi here from the Combat Center, who's a great resource for that. And of course, he sneezed right when I said his name. Love you about that, Vic. But we also have a lot of information on CDMRP and DoD information. Laura is going to talk more about that in her presentation, but we have outside consultants who are expert in this field who are here to help any researchers who want to learn more about this. We have some YouTube links here. I believe we'll send out the slides after if you want to watch the webinars they gave about a year ago, which are still pertinent about how to apply because it's a little bit of a different program. We will encourage you all to watch that again. So we talked a lot about funding. We also get to talk about authorizations and the administration and what's going on. In the last year, we have 3 new leaders at NIH. The Senate confirmed Dr. Monica Bertagnolli after a 7-month confirmation process. She got confirmed with a very large bipartisan vote. And it was really great to see the consistent bipartisanship for her. Dr. Bertagnoli was previously the NCI director for about 8 months before she got tabbed to be NIH director. And before that, she was actually at Mass Gen Brigham as an oncology researcher. We have Dr. Jean Marazzo, who is the new NIAID director. She took over in October, replacing Dr. Fauci. Happened very quietly, which I think was very intentional. She was actually the head of infectious disease at the University of Alabama, Birmingham Medical Center. And then we also have Dr. Kimron Rampmel, who's now the new NCI director. She started in mid-December officially. She came from Vanderbilt University Medical Center. What's really nice about this is we have 3 new leaders who all come from academic medicine and understand the importance of academic partnerships and extramural research. So it's really great to see that 3 of the bigger agencies have new leadership that has connections to academic medicine. And we're really curious to kind of see how they do their roadmap. Dr. Bertagnoli officially took over in mid-November, so she's still kind of establishing her new priorities. On authorizing committees on medical research, we saw 2 things happen. In the House, a lot of oversight over the NIH from Chair Kathy McMorris Rogers, who's a Republican from Washington. A lot of this stems from some of the COVID issues and origins of COVID. They were looking at how NIH has appointed all of their agencies. So they've been really heavy on the oversight of the NIH. In the Senate, we saw a lot of requests for information on different health agencies. We actually answered an RFI as a system then that we've worked really closely with Dr. Flagg and his team, as well as the teams between the research teams at all 3 of our campuses, to write an answer to Ranking Member Bill Cassidy, who's a cardiologist from Louisiana, when he asked questions about NIH reforms and the way we can do it. He also did these RFIs for CDC, 340B, HRSA, SAMHSA. Pick your health program. He's trying to get a request for information on it. He wants, in case any policy moves, he wants as much answers and research as possible to make informed policy decisions. And that is where the Senate has been sitting. So it's really nice to see that they're trying to do thorough information. So if they were to move, that is what they would do. So now, what actually bills are on the table to be authorized, and also some rules that have been introduced from the administration that we're following. So Congress has to do the Pandemic and All Hazards Preparedness Act. It passed both the House and the Senate right now, but they need to conference the bills together. The SUPPORT Act, which was the big Mental Health Substance Use Disorder Act that they did a few years ago, that is up for reauthorization. They're trying to tie it into other mental health legislation. Both the Energy and Commerce and Health Committee have moved forward different pieces of legislation. They have to combine them together. This is where I mentioned lame duck and second sessions of Congress are more productive. We might see, since these proposals have bipartisan supports and just differences between the House and the Senate, we will probably see in the late half of this year, these come together and actually pass as part of a larger funding bill before 2025 hits. So we are closely monitoring to see how those could potentially impact us. We're also monitoring reforms to NIH, CDC, HRSA, SAMHSA, as I mentioned, and what grants may come out of those agencies. There's been some movement on drug pricing and a rule from the administration on margin rights that we are currently working on a response to. I'm not going to go more into that until we have our ducks in a row on that, but it's something we are closely monitoring in case anyone saw the RFI from the administration on that one. Research integrity and reporting requirements is something that constantly comes up, and security. We're also closely monitoring, this isn't a research issue, the telehealth waivers expire on December 31st, 2024. I'd like to remind everyone that that's going to come fast and furious, and we do expect a long-term solution from a bipartisan end on that part. So I just want to thank you guys all for taking the time today. I just also want to shout out some of my amazing colleagues that I have across the system who really work in government relations and will represent all of you. So I'm our federal relations representative for CU Anschutz. My colleague, Rebecca Massey, she represents us at the state capitol. I have amazing colleagues at some of our partner entities. So Chantel at UC Health, Ellen, who was here, but I believe she had to step out, from Children's Hospital of Colorado. We work so closely together to make sure the Andrews Medical Campus is on one page federally and at the state, and we're all working together. I have a new colleague, Katie Ryan, who's also awesome at Denver Health. If you have any questions about anything, happy to connect you to all of them, but we are here as experts and resources for you all if you have any questions about any of these entities. And I believe that's it for me, so I'm going to turn it over to Laura now.
All right. So my section of this talk is a little less full of drama. That's not what we want. Sorry about that. Okay, so what we're going to talk about in this second half is really the extramural funding that flows out of the federal system and what we're doing on campus to really support those initiatives. So before I dig into what we're doing, who are we? So the Office of Research Development and Strategy, we're a new office here on campus established in 2022 with the vision of Dr. Tom Flagg. And we're here really to help grow and enhance the research funding portfolio across the campus. We are very aligned with our federal counterparts in a different way than Brett is. So we really are at the programmatic level, working with branch chiefs, working with program officers and program managers to understand where is the funding, where is it going, and how can we be responsive to that. We build collaborations, not just on campus here, but across the system and even outside of the system. Where there are gaps in our research or where there are directions we can head, those are the collaborations and partnerships we're intentional in building. We also really focus on, instead of just waiting for opportunities to come to us, to cultivate opportunities within the federal system. So there are definitely opportunities to help carve out programs. There are opportunities to align and contract with the federal system that we can be proactive in. So driving that alignment between our campus and the federal agencies. And Brett, I cannot talk as fast as you, so I'm a little bit slower. I can feel it. Two of our areas of focus right now are diversifying funding, and which we are doing, and Brett mentioned that, and we're doing a great job in terms of the DoD funding, which comes a lot out of Dr. Vic Bavarda's Combat Center. We also make sure that we are aligned with what's happening federally. So those new programs that are coming out, we want to make sure we're tracking them, and we have the resources to be competitive in that space. And there's a variety of benefits of doing this and really focusing on our portfolio and how we align with the federal system. Risk mitigation is one of those, financial stability, opportunities for collaboration, and so on. So the three federal agencies I'm going to talk about today are ARPA-H, NIH, and DoD. This is where our focus area is. It doesn't mean that those others don't matter, but there's a lot going on in these three areas that we really can be responsive to. So when I talk about diversifying funding at the NIH, we are well funded at the NIH. Anywhere between 80 and 90% of our funding has over the last 10-ish years been from the NIH, and as it should be, that makes sense. But as Brett alluded to, funding is stagnant. So what do we do with that? I don't see that as gloom and doom. I see it as an opportunity to really think about how can we be creative with our how we work with the NIH? How can we think about where our research goes across the different institutes and centers, or what you'll see me call ICs. So realigning our strategy. There's many areas where we can do that across the NIH, and thinking about the different funding mechanisms that are available, understanding the pay lines at the different ICs, and understanding the award rates by mechanism, by IC, because there is so much variability. So if you are a researcher who can cross over various ICs, it really makes sense to utilize this data to think about where you can better align yourself, or where the opportunities are to realign yourself. And then there's also opportunity to think about where are the gaps in programs. So it is not uncommon that within different institutes or centers, you will have research overlap. And it may be at one institute that portfolio for that specific area of research is saturated. But in another IC or another institute, there's plenty of opportunity for funding. So really understanding that funding landscape is important as an investigator to understand where your opportunities are. So I'm just going to give you an example of that variability that exists. So this is an example of success rates for what NIH deems their traditional team science mechanisms. So here you can see at the NCI for PO1s looks very different than the award rate for P30s. And NCI in 2022 did not fund any U19s, and they haven't, and they may in the future. So again, something important to track. And then you can compare that to how that looks with other institutes and centers. So there is a lot of variability, and there's a lot of reasons why the NIA has a 100% success rate with U54s. And we don't need to dig into that now, but this gives you some data to think about where opportunities may lie for you. It's a starting point. It doesn't answer all your questions. And we can look at that with RO1s as well. So here's an example of the National Eye Institute with about 27% success rate for RO1s. And if you compare that to a few of the other, this isn't all of them, a few of the other ICs across the NIH, there is quite a bit of variability with NCI usually hanging around that 10 to 13%. So again, this is just some preliminary data to think about your strategy as you're approaching the NIH and where your funding might come from those different institutes and centers. Within the Office of Research Development, we do have some opportunity to embark in strategic planning sessions through consultations with my team. And those are really to help on that kind of proposal strategy initiatives that I just spoke about. And we can also help you to socialize your research. That looks different at the DoD than it does the NIH, and how you approach that ought to be different. But understanding that landscape of the different programs within the different ICs is going to be really meaningful to understand where your fit might be. Okay, ARPA-H. There's a lot to say about ARPA-H. They are keeping us really busy, but I think in a positive way. I'm really excited about the opportunity that's available in ARPA-H. New funding agency, first program was released in March of 2023. I'm just going to really briefly go over this because this is, there's a lot embedded in here. But ARPA-H has what they call their Health Innovation Network, and that's a hub and spoke model. So there's 2 of them. Those hubs have already been identified, and what they're looking for are spokes to really take programs that come through those hubs and really implement them into the community. So we have, as of last week, I believe, I sent Tom an email letting him know that we were designated as a customer experience hub, or a customer experience spoke of that hub. And we are working very closely with our partners at CU Innovations to develop out an application for the Investor Catalyst Hub. That's been a request from ARPA-H to put in both of these spoke applications. So we've got one working on the other. The other interesting thing that came about very organically was something that ARPA-H is now calling these health ecosystems. We were the first and so far the only health ecosystem where we had ARPA-H here on campus. And they came to us asking us to do a deep dive in a couple specific areas around human health. And they wanted to have really think tank brainstorming sessions with a few experts. And we held those and they were very successful, and ARPA-H was very excited about what we were able to put together. So they're using that as a model for other academic institutions to apply to ARPA-H to do these, conduct these health ecosystem experiences. Since that experience, they have come to us asking about engaging in what they are calling, this is all new to me, it's every day something's new, immersive experiences. And they've proposed working with us to really do a deep dive in a human health issue, that they would spend about 2 to 3 days here on campus, really understanding what are our capabilities, what are our capacities, and how can we be responsive to that human health initiative. So that's still in process, and I've been talking to some people here about what that might look like. So more to come, but hopefully the next couple months we have ARPA-H here visiting with us again. So our office with ARPA-H is really working on developing a face and a brand with them. We really want them to know who we are, what our capabilities are, what our capacities and expertise is, and that we can assemble and deliver. So that has really been where most of our efforts are focused right now. And so far, I think we've been successful. The other opportunities we have within our office is Proposers Day. For those of you who aren't familiar with the ARPA-H funding process, Proposers Day align with the release of a program. A program is released, you have a couple weeks to get your big idea together and attend Proposers Day. that's your opportunity to engage with a program officer. This is not like the NIH. You don't shoot them an email, get on a phone call and say, give me some feedback on my idea. They will not do that, but what they will do is bring you to Proposers Day and chat about your idea. It's also a teaming event. So these contracts that come out of ARPA-H are large, they're team science, they're interdisciplinary. They expect that you don't have everything in one institution. This is to bring people together with similar areas of research and to develop teaming as well. So our office will provide stipends for people to attend Proposers Day. They tend to be limited. They usually say 1 or 2 people per institution. So we try to get ahead of what's coming down the pipeline to make sure that we have representation there at each Proposers Day. And then we do hold strategy consultations, and these are evolving as we're learning about what ARPA-H is and what they're looking for. So we are developing guidance as we are getting more abstracts submitted, getting more abstracts moving from abstract to proposal and proposal to negotiations. So as we're learning that, we're realizing what they're looking for and how to best align. So if there are questions, we have consultation sessions to help answer those questions. And then briefly, I want to talk about DoD, specifically CDMRP. As I mentioned earlier, we've done a pretty darn good job, and it has nothing to do with me or my office, but getting DoD funding. And that's really changed over the last few years, and Combat Center is really a big part of that. But we also know that there's others out there. There are other investigators out there that could align with the DoD and may not have explored that avenue. It's hard. People tell me who are DoD funded, it's not. But if you're an NIH funded investigator, it is a shift and it is a different way of putting a proposal together. So what we have done, my office, along with Brett, Combat Center, Dr. Babarda and his team, and our amazing consultants that Brett had mentioned earlier, Cornerstone, they have amazing expertise in DoD research. They understand what it takes to socialize research, which is very different than what it takes at the NIH. They understand how to remessage proposals, and they understand what it takes to put that application together. So we work in combination with all of those that I just talked about. It's an amazing collaboration. And what investigators can do with this Defense Connect initiative, if you have an idea or if you have research that you think can align with the DoD, you can submit like a 1-pager. Doesn't have to be super thorough, but enough to get your ideas across. And we will organize a consultation session with all of these individuals to really help you think about alignment, messaging, socialization. Are there opportunities with the Combat Center to collaborate? So this is an initiative, I will say, has loosely been in place from Brett and I about a year ago, and we're more, we're establishing it a little bit more structure around it, and some information about that and how to apply to that program or that initiative will go out in the next few weeks from my office. So be on the lookout. Okay, really quickly. The other thing, are we doing okay with time? Yes. We want to leave enough time for questions and answers, but I want to talk about monitoring the funding landscape. This isn't always easy because the analytics are tricky, but they are out there. So what we do is we look at the data coming from the federal system, what's being funded programmatically, and are we aligning with that? Do we have the capabilities to align with the directions and the trends of the funding? Do we have the programs and initiatives that can support the different funding programs that are coming out of the federal system? And there's a few areas that I'm going to highlight here because we are seeing it consistently across the various biomedical extramural funding agencies. So climate health is one of them. Climate health, we're seeing NSF, DoD, specifically NIH. There's a variety of collaboratives that the NIH has put together and has funded. 40% increase in funding at the NIH has been dedicated to climate change and health, or climate health more broadly. And that cuts across 11 different ICs. So that just tells us how interdisciplinary this area is and how it speaks to a lot of people. We have a lot of that work going on right now on campus. So the few things that we have done, we are definitely collaborating with Boulder. They have been a partner with us in climate health. There's a lot of work going on there as well. So in AB Nexus, which is one of our internal funding initiatives, we have a new track that's dedicated to climate health. That's to bring together or seed collaborations between Boulder and Anschutz. So we're prepared. We're prepared for all of this funding that we know is coming down from the federal system. We're holding teaming events. Just last week, I think we had a really productive and exciting climate health event that was held in Boulder, and it was a collaboration between Anschutz and Boulder. We had NSF program officers, NIH program officers talking about their initiatives, why it's important, and the direction that they're headed. So it's an opportunity to also engage with various program officers at the federal system. And then within our office, we're creating, along with Boulder, a funding opportunity database or portfolio. So those that are interested in this area can really go straight to this one database and find those funding opportunities that are specifically related to you and your work. The other one that I'm assuming everyone has heard about is AI, high throughput computing and quantum science. I think Tom is going to bury his head when I talk about quantum over and over again. I'm super excited about it. I'm not sure he's excited as I am, but there's a lot, I got a thumbs up. There's a lot happening in this space. And again, it's coming from all directions. It's interesting because quantum and human health, we have no idea where it's going to go. We imagine the capabilities of what quantum can do in human health. And there's a variety of health systems and academic centers that are on board and pushing this initiative with some major industry partners. So we don't want to be I don't want to be left behind. I'm looking at you. I don't want to be left behind. So we have a variety of initiatives in place to make sure we are not left behind. And of course, Boulder is one of our partners in this. So they have to be. They're amazing. They have the credibility in this space, but we have the human health. So this is another area that we have a specific track in AB Nexus that to seed, again, that partnership between Anschutz and Boulder to think about what are those near-term wins in human health and quantum that we can really think about and work through to then hopefully expand over time. Teaming events, again, we've already had a couple of these and we will have more. Our first one was an event with Boulder and some folks from Denver who are really working on this area of quantum and health. We are working very closely with industry. Our industry partners at Atom Computing are very interested in how they can take their unique quantum computing, which is very different than IBM, and IBM seems to have the stake in this, and how they can use their quantum computers to use as use cases for human health, and they would like Anschutz to be that use case. So we're working very closely with them. And then we are also a part of the Tech Hub. You may have heard information about the EDA Tech Hub. This has been a big deal, and this was the Tech Hub was designated by the state. The Quantum Tech Hub, called Elevate Quantum, we are in the process of a proposal for $1 billion to create quantum broadly across the state of Colorado and really develop jobs and technology across the state of Colorado. So our Anschutz stake in that is really the human health use cases in quantum. So more to come, and we'll see what happens with that. We have some fierce competition in that space. And here we're also creating a funding opportunity database or portfolio for individuals that are interested in this space to dive in and find those opportunities that are specific to them. Okay, and I can't go very far without talking about team science because this is important. It's the direction. It has been the direction of the federal system. NIH had declared a statement around team science about 10 years ago. NSF, DOD, we're starting to see more and more team science funding mechanisms being released, and ARPA-H is pretty much everything team science. So this is hard. We don't all know how to do this, and we do have some funding mechanisms to help support. We're building some education into Aspire, which is one of our team science specific mechanisms, which is a collaboration with the School of Medicine, specifically Dr. David Schwartz and Dr. Lori Sussel. So these are really to help, again, see teams to come together in a unique way that they have not been come together before. And hopefully it leads to some of these larger, more complex team science initiatives. And that's really what does elevate our research. Okay, just really quickly, because we have 15 minutes left. Some resources and communications from our office. So we do have a website. It's still in process of development, but here you can find a grant. We do not have our grant library yet. We are working on our grant library. That's going to take us some time. But the grant library has a variety of resources for those developing out applications for hopefully NIH, DOD, NSF, ARPA-H as that evolves. the funding landscape, it's kind of what we're talking about here today. We do develop funding landscape reports, and you can see some snippets of those that are on our website. Those are developed every year, and you can really see like what the projections are for funding across the different federal systems. There is a funding database. You can look at that across the federal foundation, and then we also have an internal database of all the internal funding opportunities that not just lie within the Vice Chancellor's office, but go broadly across campus. Funding focus. This was part of Tom's funding bulletin, research bulletin, right? And so we divided that up, and Tom now has his own thing, and funding focus is just funding. It's just information about opportunities, resources, information that's coming down directly from the federal system that will impact your applications. So it's more concentrated just in that area. That comes out every 2 weeks. And you'll see that coming out from our office. And then you see this thing called ARPA-H alert. It could be DoD alert. These are alerts where I call these rapid responses. If you see this come across your email, this means that we have 2 or 3 weeks to respond to something. So pay attention if this is interest to you, and reach out if this is interest to you. So those are the more timely, important information that comes out from our office. So these are the broad communication tactics that we have, and the more we get to know individuals' research, the more we can do more targeted approaches, and we do that with our collaborators on campus. And so the more we interact and understand where your research is headed, the directions that you're wanting to go, the challenges that you're having, hopefully over time we can start targeting more and more. Okay, so with that said, feel free to contact me, Laura Buccini. Diane Liddell is our director, my director of collaborations and partnerships. And Jamie Kuttner is my director of NIH and DoD funding and programs. Erin Calhoun is my director of ARPA-H funding and programs, and our website is there at the bottom. And I believe these will be released to everybody, these slides. Questions for Brett or myself? I think Tom will come around with the microphone.
And we are recording this, so I'll bring the mic over and you can ask your
repeat
question. That's great.
Very quickly, since I saw a lot of cameras going off, will you make these slides available since they're so beautiful and informative to the group here?
Will the slides be available?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for the question. That's my husband back there, actually. So he felt like he needed to say something. Yes, those slides will be made available. Thank you, Dr. Schultz.
The question over here.
So a question about the NIH funding. So that is possibly projected to decrease. It's not clear. You said not to pay attention to what the House asks, but on the other side, NIAID or NIAID has already decided to cut the budget significantly. I don't know, maybe projecting this decrease, and for instance has cut 10% of the yearly budget. So I just received like the yearly budget for my R01, for instance, and they cut 10%. And this is, it was an R01 that I had for like already 4 years. It's last year. And so they're cutting across 10%, plus they're cutting budget overall. So there's going to be less R01 application funded, etc. So how do you reconcile this?
I think a lot of reasons for that too is also the new direction of that institute. You said NIAID, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think it's no question about who was an NIAID director for nearly 40 years and who no longer is an NIAID director. And we have seen some shifts in that agency. What I will say is the government funding is what the government funding is. How each institute administers it is up to each institute. So I can do some more digging on why NIAID is doing the way that it did. But the House and Senate proposal, you saw the numbers, that's what it is. I will say the House proposal will not go through for NIAID. It was a very politically charged proposal, but you saw flat funding in the Senate that was passed 26-2, which was an incredible bipartisan support. So that is what I would probably expect the final number to be along those lines. But however, Dr. Marazzo and the NIAID plans to administer the grants. Maybe they're doing less grants. Maybe they're trying to cut overhead down. There's other reasons that they could be doing what they're doing. But the way that Congress funds each agency is the way that Congress funds each agency. And then it's up to the director of each institute to kind of figure it out themselves. So I would chalk a lot of that up to new leadership and trying to kind of create a new direction. And I think that's also a really interesting agency too, because Dr. Bertagnoli did talk about in her first advisory committee to the director meeting, she did talk about regaining trust in science. And I think you think that's really probably the only politically charged institute, whether that's correct or not. Right now it is. And I think some of these changes could be trying to regain trust in science and regain trust in medical research that may have been lost. So that's just my gut opinion, but I can definitely do some more research for you and find out.
Great questions. Any other questions? I might want to throw one towards you, Brett. You showed a great graph, which shows the absolute dollars kind of going up in NIH and the adjusted, inflation adjusted, which kind of just got back to neutral after all these years. Maybe just to build on that question, I think a lot of us would like to see those absolute dollars going up. Is that any sense of we should expect that? If that's the wrong expectation, we should look at new agencies, or where you think that sort of federal focus is headed?
For fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025, I would not expect that to go up. The increases are incredibly small. That was negotiated, and that comes a lot down to the split government that has happened. I think we have impending elections. I think there could be some tea leaves that are written that could lead some new chambers going to new hands of different party leadership in both ends. That could change the political environment. I just think right now, under the current political environment, I think we are going to see close to flat funding for NIH, which will put it under inflation. And that I believe it's the smaller bar will go probably down a little bit, but that doesn't mean it's still not a large scale increase for NIH. It doesn't mean that there are not going to be other opportunities. And that's what I think a lot of the work that Dr. Buccini and I have been doing. And we talk a lot about these. So these are actual coordinated efforts about what her office is doing and what's happening federally is there, but looking at other agencies and institutes is going to kind of be a good thing to look at right now, just because we are in this really tough fiscal environment. The caps are set for the next 2 years.
I think I agree with that. That's my same sense. I think being strategic and proactive then, as Laura's office is doing, working very closely with yours and looking at these new opportunities is key. Laura, I have one question for you too. So all this great stuff with ARPA-H, we kind of laugh and joke a little bit here. It's like every day, every week, there's new stuff. If somebody sees an alert, they're sort of an interest in it, what should be the threshold to reach out to you or your office? Low threshold, high threshold, if they've got questions, and what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I think that the best thing to do, if you have a big idea that you think aligns with ARPA-H, I would contact myself as easiest, or Erin Calhoun, who is the director for ARPA-H, and we can help to think about, is that idea in alignment? I think we have a pretty good sense of that right now. And there's also different mechanisms or different programs that some people's ideas could fit into. So strategically thinking about how do we navigate those different programs. So I think as soon as you feel that there's an idea, contact us, because there's also others on campus that we could probably create some teaming with. These require big teams.
And I think we've seen a few things that have sat for a while and maybe kicked around. If they'd reached out really early, we could have even been, Laura specifically, been more help. Any last questions from the group? Oh, you're right here, Erin. That's fantastic.
So one of your slides talked about that there were calls for more oversight of NIH. When those calls have surfaced in the past, has that trickled down to impact recipients of grants? Does that come down to slower review of grants, more enforcement of grant policies, something that would impact our researchers?
A majority of the oversight has actually happened in the House of Representatives, where you have a different party controlling the House of Representatives than is the current administration. So it is a lot of political theater. And we haven't really seen large scale reforms proposed yet. What I will say is if there are large scale proposals performed, which is what the request for information from Senator Cassidy was about, to get information from key stakeholders. They had over 10,000 recipients and they're reading all of them to be ready in case there is any movement. It's not to move anything, it's to have actual answers from stakeholders and listening to see what's the best to move. It will be rinsed and repeated and be done really closely in touch with kind of what the community believes. And it will not be done just hastily, kind of the way that it is. I think we need to pay attention to some of the oversight because that's some of the political rhetoric that could be driving all of that. But right now it is mostly political theater, but it's still worth paying attention to.
Great question. Any other questions from the group? Okay, well, as we wrap up today, I just say a couple of things. I just want to personally thank Laura and Brett for your partnership with us, with me personally, with the campus, Brett and Laura with the campus community. Hopefully what you've seen today is some examples of how we're trying to be proactive and strategic in this area, how we're trying to partner with different people, whether that's the federal agencies, other campuses, and so forth. So I really appreciate the leadership from both of you. Put a round of applause.
Thank you, Dr. Craig.